Welcome back to Spitballin Cards. In today's video, we're talking all about redemptions. Topps actually announced that these redemptions are extended a few years, which we'll discuss. On top of that, repacks, whatnot, and potentially Topps Industry Summit if we have time. So let's discuss who's here. We have a full cast this week. We have my name's Scott, we have Phil, we have Chris, and we have Jeff. Ty's not here this week, but Ty, if you're listening, hope you're doing well. And welcome. Thanks for joining. Let's discuss redemptions. Historically, redemptions have always pissed off collectors, right? Panini has redemptions, Topps has redemptions. It's just always kind of been a sore subject, especially for people who collect wax. All that wax behind Phil, at least one of those boxes has a redemption in it, most likely. Sometimes it's not a big deal, right? The redemption's not a great player. It still stinks if that's your only autograph, but no big deal. Other times it's a really big deal when the driving players of that set are actually redemptions. So what was announced is Topps is actually making it so you have 10 years from the time the product's released. So if it's a 2023 product, you would have till 2033 instead of 2025. So they extended it basically another 7 or 8 years, which is great news. So I want to hear your thoughts on this all. I know this was a goal of Fanatics when they purchased Topps and acquired the company, and they're starting to actually make good on that promise, which is a good step in the right direction. So Jeff, what do you think about this whole situation?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's a step in the right direction. And in their press release, they talked about this just being the first step. They're also actively trying to reduce the number of redemptions in their products, which is great. As we've talked about, it seems like sometimes there's necessary to put it in there to get the product out. But the non-expiration is a huge thing. I don't have quite the collection that Phil does with wax, but I love collecting wax. But the biggest deterrent to that or to other people buying sealed wax is those expiring redemptions. So I think this will go a long way in the future towards helping that situation. But they're going to go back, I believe, to 2021. Products from 2021, 2022 and forward are going to have that 10-year grace period, which is great because I think, as we've seen from the mistakes that Topps has made the past few years in forgetting to put cards in products, putting the wrong amounts in products, they make up for it by sending out a lot of these old redemption autographs, which just makes you feel bad for the person who probably pulled that and got nothing for it. So I like this. I think it is a step in the right direction, and I think they still have ways to go, though.
Yeah. Phil, what do you think?
At first, when I didn't know about all the details, I was like, okay, so I've got an inventory of wax that doesn't come from the future. It comes from the past. And all of this stuff isn't affected. And all it's going to help is the new stuff that Fanatics is creating. And it's going to be easier for them to sell it because the gimmicks that they are also using to pump product sales, those will expire. The buyback programs, the bounties, those most of which will expire. But the 10 years will be a way for them to just sell more stuff and add more value to it, where the old stuff that I have will rot. And then Chris had said, or you made some comment about, oh, well, they could have brought it back to 2020. You're probably thinking about Stadium Club Chrome or something.
Or something.
And then I was like, oh, 2021. That's pretty fortunate. So like right now, we are already out 3 years from 2021. So what happens to the people that were already turned down? I'm a little bit curious about that. I'm assuming they've already turned down people that missed the 2-year window. At some point in the past 6 years ago, Bowman products actually had a 3-year window and everything else was 2. And then they streamlined it and then everything became 2 years. But I like it now because when I was doing my end of year inventory of 2023, I looked back and I saw my exposure of 2022 product and it was a lot higher than I wanted it to be. I don't know how many of those key cards in those products are redemptions. Termar Johnson is one. Probably at the time, he was in the top 2 chase in Bowman draft with 22 Bowman draft when it came out, and Jackson Holiday was number 1. So that's a big one, and I'm sure there's plenty of others. So I'm happy, and I think Fanatics / Topps has said that they want to abolish or get rid of redemptions entirely. I think that's their goal, and that's going to take a little bit longer. But I think we saw some strides towards the end of last year where some products that usually were kind of redemption heavy did not have many of them or did not feature them at all.
Yeah, I have to say, as someone who is made physically ill by sticker autos, I'm still bummed I missed that podcast that we did, but that's okay. I always have said I would prefer a redemption than a sticker auto. until Jeff and I opened up some 2020 Stadium Club Chrome, as Phil alluded to, and we pulled a redemption for a Bo Bichette orange refractor, like rookie auto, number to 25. Like arguably at the time, that would have been like a top 5 card you could pull, I think. And, you know, Topps told us essentially to kind of kick rocks on that. They sent us like a $12 little gift bag. So I'm very, very excited by this news because I like the idea that these redemptions, we should always have access to the card that we redeem. I just wish they go back a little bit further, like to say 2018, because there's a lot of Ohtani redemptions that year that I'm sure, I don't know why they wouldn't go back that far, but those have got to be some of the biggest redemptions still sitting out there. And I'm sure there are in some of those boxes behind Phil right there. If they'd gone back to 2018, I bet a couple of those boxes would have shot up a little bit. 2021 is okay. You know, now we get access to more Kelenic autos, which is fun, or Kelnick autos, I should say. Some Dylan Carlson, maybe some Joe Adell. But yeah, I think all in all, this is great. Like this makes me more excited about opening stuff. Not that I plan on opening a ton, but 10 years is a nice window. I wish it were longer, but it is what it is. Steps in the right direction are great.
It was interesting when, remember they forgot the rookies in 2022 Topps Chrome? Is that the set it was? They had Bryce Harper Topps Chrome rookie autographs, Nolan Arenado Topps Chrome rookie autographs in the silver packs as their apology for forgetting those players. So they still had those basically 10 years later. So I'm guessing there is like a 10-year threshold, and after that 10 years, who knows what happens to them. So they had those in-house. So maybe they do have some of the Ohtanis. I'm guessing the Ohtanis, if they had them in-house, I don't want to like accuse anybody because there's nothing behind it, but those might walk out the door somehow, right? If it's been 7-8 years and it's an Ohtani autograph. But yeah, it's one of those things. Also, I wanted to point out, Chris, I'm really glad you were on that sticker auto discussion. I did not need anyone else up against me because it was crazy. So anyways, but yeah, redemptions, I'm actually going to share the post that Topps announced. Maybe we can just look at it real fast, get an idea of their sentiment. And overall, I think that everybody will be happy if redemptions just went away in general. So they basically said 1 year ago, we had over 70,000 redemptions owed to collectors. Today, that number is below 10,000. Moving forward, redemptions will now have a 10-year expiration window of 2 years. They're backdating it, yada, yada, yada. Year over year, the amount of redemptions will go down substantially. And I remember I think it was Phil that mentioned this. They did say they were going to go away for good. They walked that back. I think they would have stated that here. Our goal is to get rid of them. I think now that Fanatics owns the company, even though they have good relationships with the MLBPA and whatever, company other brands they work with, they probably realize that at times it's impossible to not have redemptions because of the way that the players sign, unless they want to keep pushing product back. And so it is what it is, but it's nice to see it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. And for some additional perspective, most of us here don't buy a lot of Panini stuff, but the problems there are exponentially worse, where they're not even getting the card ever. Yeah. They're getting it within that window.
Not getting the card in points, right? It's just a mess.
Right. So I think the 10-year window, I mean, I'll be a little extra patient, in their process of eliminating redemptions now, given that the window is now 10 years. I think that's awesome. Now, you were talking about, Scott, like what happens to some of the cards that never get redeemed? What do they do with them? And I believe Topps has said in the past that they hold them back for replacements if there's damaged cards. But who would get a replacement Bowman Chrome auto of Ohtani hitting pose? Because those are expired redemptions now. And if they were to start this back up at 2018, there would have been a ridiculous arbitrage opportunity in those boxes, although they're still selling for too much, because I think a lot of people that are buying them now don't realize that you literally can't pull anything from specifically the HTA version of that 2018 Bowman Chrome product. There was an instance within the last few years where somebody tweeted Topps that had pulled an expired Ohtani, and I think it might have been the Bowman Chrome hitting pose from 2018.
I think it was the orange. Yeah, I think it was an orange auto.
That's brutal.
And he made a big stink, and it was probably negative publicity, and this might have been right after Fanatics took over, maybe before. I don't know. But anyways, Topps/Fanatics caved, and he was able to get the card. So that's interesting, because you're not going to, when you're at the top of the hierarchy, you don't substitute for other guys. You're not a replacement of anybody else but yourself. And how many damaged Ohtani Bowman Chrome autographs are out there, really?
I think my biggest problem with that, Phil, is that it should be the card should be the property of the person that pulls the redemption, and yet it's remaining Topps property to do with as they please, whether it's handing them out in silver packs as apologies. They're getting the equity of that product, which just doesn't seem fair. So that's my biggest problem with it.
So I heard they like just destroyed the cards. Is that not true anymore? Obviously, it wasn't true with the Harpers and Arenados. Like I know with like the Pujols from 2001, there was a rumor that they were just destroyed if they didn't get redeemed. But that brings up a question. Would you like every 10th year, the redemptions that are now fully expired, it's its own product where it's all the redemptions in one product, like a mystery bag, right? We're seeing all these repacks. What if we had like a redemption repack product now that Topps is doing? What's your thoughts there?
That goes against what Jeff was just saying. It's like,
fun,
how's that any different than like a silver pack other than they screwed up first? Now they're going to give you these as complimentary prizes. But instead, with what you're saying, Scott, you have to pay for it again. So Scott, Topps slash Fanatics makes money twice, which they would do if they launched their own repack.
That's a great segue into repacks. Anybody have any final comments about redemptions? Or you feel like we're in a pretty good spot?
I think we're in a pretty good spot. I did hate that. I hated those cards showing up in silver packs, though. I hated that.
It kind of pissed me off because people tried to redeem those cards and Topps said no. That kind of pisses me off.
Yeah, I was mad.
So that whole thing was a mess. It's amazing. I'm not going to go too deep in this. It's amazing how many messes they've had in the last few years with just forgetting cards, damaged cards, multiple superfractors. It's pretty crazy. Okay, repacks. Let's discuss it. So if you're not familiar, there is a selling platform called Whatnot. Whatnot has been known for mostly negative things among like traditional collectors because of all the scams that happen. Breakers will open cards and then they'll not send it out and things like that. Overall, though, Whatnot, the higher end breakers do a pretty good job of being reputable breakers. And on that platform, they sell Pokemon cards, sports cards, handbags. They do watches. They have all sorts of different things you can buy. But one specific category that has become extremely popular are repacks. And the reason for that is because right now, especially if you're a basketball football collector, if you were to go open a product of, let's say, what's the product that's Kaboom in it? Ty would know. It's the, what is it, Phil?
Panini Absolute, I believe.
Absolute. Thank you. So when a box Absolute, you're going to absolutely get destroyed. You're just not going to make an ROI back. It's going to be 10% unless you hit big. And even if you hit big, it's not going to be that much more than the cost of the box. It's kind of how that type of product works. So people on Whatnot, what they have been doing is they've actually been buying and paying essentially full price of market value, 100% comps, for cards, and then doing repacks on their channels on Whatnot. And the way this works, let's say there's 100 different packs on this repack. Each pack costs, we'll just say $1,000 each. $100,000 is how much value is essentially in there. There's a big chase card worth 10 to 15 grand, and the minimum floor is, let's say, $500. So the worst you're going to do is lose 50%. It's kind of the thought process, and it's become very popular. There's been a lot of mixed emotions about this. One, because it feels even more like gambling than opening up just random packs of cards. Two, it's actually becoming difficult to find cards at card shows. And just overall, three, it's kind of putting a fake demand for these cards on the secondary market. So I want to talk about repacks. It's kind of been discussed quite a bit. Neo did a fantastic job on his channel if you want to watch that. But I just want to hear your thoughts on repacks, if you think they're horrible for the hobby, anything there. I don't want to dive too deep into financials, but more from the collector perspective. If you like it, don't like it, and any advice you would give. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think you can probably guess. I am not a fan of this at all. I really don't. I just don't get it. I don't understand the demand from it. I don't understand as a potential buyer, like why you would do this. I just feel like there isn't enough. Like the hobby is already tricky as it is with trying to pull a card that you want. I just don't. I don't get this. Like the hobby. We can make this very, very simple with a very simple hashtag that maybe we should start. And it's just buy the card you want. Like if you want a card, go find that card for sale and buy that card. Like stop trying to pull this card magically out of a box or out of a repack that you're trusting some stranger to have actually put in the repack. I mean, do they open these things? Do they open all the repacks live on camera?
So that's one thing they've done pretty well is they will open the entire run of all 100 at one time. That's what Neo said. I don't use Whatnot often. Actually, I've never bought anything on Whatnot, I don't think. I did something on there as a giveaway in my channel one time, but that's what Neo mentioned. So yes.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel slightly better. But still, I would avoid this. Just buy the card you want.
Okay. Phil, what do you think?
I actually I just started doing Whatnot a few days ago, and I'm now addicted to buying into breaks of repacks. So, did we give context on what a repack is?
I
It's
did
a little bit.
basically.
Okay, you said it was. Okay.
You have a bunch of cards, and it's basically like opening a product where you know what all the 100 cards are. It's random. You get one of the cards. Basically, it's just buying into a break, but higher floor. Specific kind of. Anything else you would add to that, Phil?
Yeah, and the ones we're talking about are usually targeted around single cards, often
Yes,
slab
singles.
cards. You could also do it with wax. Technically, you do it with packs. Mystery boxes are a little bit different, lower cost. You can find those on eBay, and those are like not all opened all together live. Those don't usually have a chaser, which part of that is not good for the transparency, but part of it also helps them be a lot more affordable. um, yeah, I don't know, man. It's like a part of the hobby that I haven't really delved into. I've heard about it, and I think Neo's talked about this a few times over the last seems like 6-7 months. And the first time he was calling it an essential part of the hobby because it's needed for the ecosystem and it provides liquidity back to the dealers so that they're then able to buy cards from other folks and the money goes around and around and around. I think that the issue now or dynamic now becomes a little more problematic in the way he described it in a few of his videos recently, was that now instead of repackers buying at 70 to 80% of comps, the need for product is so great and the supply is constrained where a lot of people are doing this and there's competition kind of driving this up. Now you've got those same repackers that are buying at close to 100%, maybe 90 to 95% at shows. And people are complaining that by the time they even get into the show, that first hour, where those repackers have bought that VIP pass, or maybe they've got a friend that's setting up at that show, they've cleared out all of the desirable inventory that was relatively affordable. So by the time people come in, there's not really a whole lot left for them. So is that an issue? Can this get worse? Can this pop? I really don't know. Like you would have thought that over the last few years that the cost of wax would go down, right? New releases, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. 2024 Bowman seems to be pretty expensive from a pre-sale perspective. So if people can open their wallet upside down and they keep on coming up with more and more money to pile into wax breaks, it seems like repacks aren't going to die anytime soon. Now, one of the things that, reading some of the comments of Neo's video, people have brought up that this isn't every card that's affected by this. It often is ultra modern slabs. Case hits is how a few people described it, but I see it as like the hot players. Like for baseball, you'd be targeting right now Ohtani, Juan Soto, maybe some of the hot prospects, not Jackson Holiday anymore, but specific. I wouldn't say specific players. So I've got a guy that actually sells to a repacker. And he sold recently a Bowman Chrome Auto, Bobby Witt, PSA 10, the first Bowman Chrome Auto. It's a PSA 10, so pretty desirable card of a guy that's probably, having like a top 5 to 10 start of all players in baseball right now through April. Another card that he has is Gunnar Henderson, just hit his 10th home run in April. It's the Cosmic Chrome, but it's an orange color match, PSA 10. So these are the types of cards that he's trying to feed to his buyer. And so there are some standards there, but also interestingly, he's built up a relationship with this guy enough. I don't know if they've ever met in person, but the guy doesn't even verify comps. He's like, just give it to me at a reasonable price. Yeah, that sounds about right. So it kind of shows their ability to pay 95% of comps, right? And the more they can do it outside of eBay, the better. Because you don't want to leave a paper trail, and then you can play that manipulation game of comps. Triple Crown 24 left a comment about how you can play the game of like, if you're buying it at 80 to 85%, that's really based off of the lowest of the last 3 comps. Mm-hmm. And then when you advertise it as the chase card, then you can kind of use that high comp as like, yeah, it's like right at comps. See? Mm-hmm. So really that numbers game, Neo was doing out the math. I know you told us to stay away from the math, Scott, but this guy, based on conservative estimates, or his operation was profiting close to $40,000 in one night's work.
Profiting.
Pretty damn good.
Profiting's the big word there.
Profit,
right? Yeah. They were doing like $300,000 in sales a day on Whatnot repacks.
Yeah. So it takes a lot of time to source that amount of product. But if Neo's estimates were tweaked a little bit, they'd probably be tweaked in the direction where it was actually a lot more profitable. Whatnot's commission, for most big time sellers is going to be lower than that 11% that, the schmucks are kind of getting that are just walking in the door. So on top of that, playing with comps, appraisals, everybody in the hobby does that. This is one of the most capitalistic places I've ever been. Like everybody takes advantage of that. I used to think I was a capitalist till I joined this hobby and I started buying and selling cards for 3 years.
It's interesting. I know, Jeff, you're about to jump into this, but I think at least for Jeff, Chris, and I, Ty, probably too, Phil as well, but we all approach the hobby very differently than the individuals on Whatnot. They are in it primarily from a monetary, that's actually their goal, is to have an incentive to make money, while Chris wants a cool Freddie Freeman, Jeff wants a cool Kessin Hira. Just kidding. But the goal of us is to collect what we like. And so for us, we don't really understand spending $3,000, like the cost of some of these repacks, on a random card when there's a 50% chance you lose a ton of money and a 50% chance you gain some money. But to us, we'd rather spend $3,000 on a great Acuna, PSA 10, not bat down, the Sapphire, whatever, right? So, Jeff, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's true. I think this definitely feeds the gambling itch part of the hobby for sure, because there's a chance to get a big return, and the downside, as Phil was laying out, isn't quite as much as if you buy wax these days. The part that is most interesting to me is what people have been talking about the past several months about going to shows, because I don't go to a lot of shows, but it seems like from the podcast that I've listened to and the YouTube videos I've seen that a lot of people are really disappointed in the shows giving way to repackers and losing so much inventory before the people can even get in the door. So as someone who doesn't go to shows, that part doesn't affect me a lot, but I could see how that would be a huge turnoff for somebody who that's the part of the hobby that they love the most, is going to shows and trying to find cards that they want. If they're not there, they might stop going to shows and they might get out of the hobby. So I guess that's where my concern is with all of this. I don't really understand the appeal of the repacks, but I can see the people that buy into it for the gambling aspect.
So speaking of the gambling aspect, we know that Fanatics is okay with that, right? They're pushing, and it kind of feels like they're pushing towards the gambling side. They have Fanatics Live. It's going to be interesting to see if they get involved in repacks on their own platform. They're seeing, again, this guy is making this much money and he's not a part of Fanatics. Think how much Fanatics can actually monetize this if they really try to do so. It kind of creates some issues with the brand buying back their cards and selling repacks and all these different things. What's ethical, what's not ethical. But it makes you wonder that something has to give there, because I know Fanatics likes making the money they're making now, but Fanatics would like making more money in the future. And this is one way they can do it, more so than their current lineup. So what is your thoughts? What do you think could happen? I know there's no precedent for this. It's all just a guess. But what is your thoughts on what Fanatics might do to either stop this or join it themselves? Do you think that's possible? Where do you think it might lean? What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, I answered a similar question a few months ago, and I was like, well, it all depends on how big this really is compared to the sales that they're doing, right? How much are they losing? Because people are gambling on Whatnot with repacks, or on other places with repacks, and not through Fanatics Live. And I think that's a difficult problem to solve, because a lot of this is done off the books. I don't think Whatnot makes all of that revenue broken down like that and available like that to even be able to understand how much they're really losing out on. Even then, is it really a gambler that could join their platform, or is this a completely different preference where if they weren't on Whatnot, then they wouldn't have joined Fanatics Live because they're kind of not interested in wax? Low ROI, it takes too long, they have to, whatever. They don't collect cards. They're just doing it for the itch. And the most efficient way to go about it is the low floor, high ceiling repacks or whatever. I don't know. I think if this becomes a bigger problem, then I think there are ways that maybe Fanatics can have people like lobby with Congress to add more regulations. But then if that happens, then is that an open can of open worms? Is that going to get people to then look into their platform? Like when I see all of this going down, I thought, first of all, can the four of us launch a repack? Like, no, we'd probably fail for many different reasons if we'd even want to do that. And Scott would never cross that bridge. And number two is, do we need to start a nonprofit that's like a 1-800 number for addicts because this isn't something that I don't think we plan to talk about in this segment, but Fanatics is hosting with Topps the industry summit starting today. We're recording this Monday, April 29th, and they released stats like an average customer is spending $1,300 a month on Fanatics. I don't know if that's I don't know if there's context there about, is that all through the live app or is that through the entire website on collectibles? 9 sessions per day with their app per customer, 130,000 downloads so far. So, there could be some scrutiny with what they have going down there as well with Fanatics.
So I want to just ask a question. I do think there is a world where Fanatics actually does turn and lobby to get Whatnot banned in some ways. So that way there aren't repacks on a major platform that's competing against their own. That would not surprise me. And I think they could do it in a way where they agree to certain terms on how they're breaking on their platform and they become the only place that can do it. They could totally monopolize it, in my opinion, but that's only if they can't compete with these repacks. I think they'll first try, this is a guess, again, I think they'll probably first try to make the money they can make before they do that. But this is the next option if they can't compete because of the way they're positioned as a major company.
Well, I think Phil brought up a great topic, and that's regulation. How much longer is the government going to stand by while these Whatnot accounts are making hundreds of thousands of dollars? I feel like they're looking to try to get a piece of it. So I feel like regulation is around the corner as well.
Yeah, totally agree. So it's going to be interesting. I just know I'm never going to buy into them. Not because I'm ethically against it. I'm not. It's more just I have limited funds and that's not how I want to spend it. So,
but if you did, you'd be there like.
If I was rich, I would be the biggest gambler.
Just like Ipe Mizuhara, he was on Whatnot. Right?
Yeah, he was.
He's probably buying into repacks, I'm sure.
Using Shohei's money.
Juan Soto cards he had as well. And who's the third player he was buying after Ohtani and Soto?
I think he had Samuki, actually.
Was it?
I'm pretty sure he had Samuki.
Well, you sure it wasn't Billy Butler?
Bought into Guerrero, that would explain the losses. That would help explain where all the money went.
They're running a pretty tight ship with the accounts that they're allowing on Fanatics Live. Now, they've also got breakers that are affiliated with them that have direct accounts that don't break on Fanatics Live yet, that have like their own independent thing going, like some of the bigger channels on YouTube. We could name a few, but we won't. Now, are those people allowed to do repacks, and are the Fanatics Live breakers allowed to do repacks, even if it's off their platform? Like, there's probably some controls they can put on. They've already shown the ability to exert their control, restrict supply as needed, based on my friend who's attending the Top Summit. This was implied in the past, but now they've pretty much outwardly said that if you haven't modernized your LCS, you're going to lose allocation. They pretty much said it. So they can, they have a lot of control in this game.
Yeah. It's so you said that, Phil, about people who actually put repacks into specific breaks. There's some mixers where someone will have 10 different boxes from 10 different products. Then they will have their own branded, there's 1 or 2 cards in this box. And what they did, I actually like this form of repacking. They would have 30 cards, 1 for each team, and they would have 2 cards in each box. And over the 15 breaks, it just gives everybody an extra chance to get a cool card, right? It just added a little bit higher floor. And I think that's cool, right? You have a 1 in 15 chance to get an extra card that they just included for free, essentially. But I don't think it'll be leaning that way. It's feel like it's leaning the opposite direction. So
I think I just want to add to what Phil was saying previously about the price of wax hasn't really went down. So at some point you wonder, what if this isn't affecting their sales, how much will they try to stop it? I think trying to join might be the preferred method for Fanatics. I don't see them really trying to shut down Whatnot as long as their sales keep going up and they can keep charging these exorbitant prices for the wax.
Well, the thing is, if they can make money a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth time on these repacks, I think they're going to try to do it because they make the first amount of money and then they will make a second because people will just keep buying it. And a lot of this stuff isn't super collected. Like, it's all collectible, obviously, but a lot of these sales are happening for repacks only. Then they usually would sit longer and lose value, in my opinion. And they're kind of overvalued because of the repacks buying them up. But yeah, they want to make more money as much as they can on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, sale of the same card, in my opinion.
It could be a decent approach given the industry's resistance to adopt any sort of like blockchain digital card, where theoretically the manufacturer could make money with every single exchange, in perpetuity. So this could be their way to have that, unlimited profit ceiling in lieu of not having the digital cards kind of working. So
cool. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I just wanted to, kind of unrelated to this, I felt like there was even more exciting Fanatics news that came out. For me, I saw it today. Maybe it was yesterday, but they announced that they're going to change these uniforms. Like they've acknowledged that they're screwed up. They completely threw Nike under the bus, like as aggressively thrown under the bus as I've ever seen one company do to another, which was kind of funny. But we're going to get better, more uniforms like they were before, and we can stop.
But these are billion-dollar companies, Chris. Why are we waiting till 2025? They're like, it can't be done before 2025. Come on.
I got nothing for you, Jeff. I mean, there aren't easy answers to what seem like simple questions. Maybe they just wanted to see every player's underwear. I don't know. I just don't know.
Cool.
They should just grow a sack and just blame it on the kids that are making these.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Those damn kids in Thailand, maybe their fingers are getting too big. Maybe they hired, kids that were too old. They have to go younger to get the seams as tight as we need. I don't know.
I think you have a great point, Phil. I think that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's going to be good to have the jerseys back. It's amazing how obviously bad they were. And just even watching the game, the letters were teeny. And on top of that, pants were ripping every couple games. Some people might be into that, but I think we prefer that not to be the case.
God, they are. You're talking about them as if they're in the past. We've got another 6 months of these uniforms.
Yeah, they're going to keep ripping. So maybe that's getting baseball viewership up with some demographics. Who knows? But either way, it's going to be good to have it changed. There's a lot of players. Bryce Harper's one who just wears last year's uniform and doesn't even care.
Yes, I love that. I saw that. That was amazing. I want more players to do that. That's fantastic. He's just like, nah, I'm not wearing that. Love it.
Chris Sale probably had to go to therapy to avoid cutting the uniforms up again.
That guy, man, has some.
What is he thinking with those uniforms? Maybe he just doesn't really have an ass, so he can't really see it through his pants anyways, right? We had to talk about bodies.
No ass at all. So if anything, like he would be concerned that his bony hips and knees might just rip right through the material.
It's a good thing we have to see him on the bases anymore as a hitter.
Seriously.
So, all right, guys. Well, that's a good place to end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like and leave us a comment, subscribe. Feel free to check us out on Spotify as well if you ever want to listen while you're commuting, anything along those lines. And we will see you in the next video.